Welcome back, and joining us tonight is Dr. Brooke Bello, the founder and CEO of More to Life, and Derek Thompson, the vice president of one of the programs there. I want to thank you both for joining us on this really important subject. And one of the things that occurred to me when we were watching Adam's story is, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but when we talk about the drug problem, you've heard people from some of the countries that produce narcotics saying, well, if you didn't have the demand in the U.S., we wouldn't have the manufacturing or the growing of drugs in South America.
Right.
Is that kind of the same thing here?
Absolutely, absolutely, Alan. In any industry, we don't like to call it an industry, but many people do. They call it the sex industry. Demand drives supply. A trafficker or pimp, they have a statement. They say, why burn when you can turn? If you get someone so addicted on drugs, which has its bridge to sex trafficking, then you just throw her out in the street and she just looks like a has-been, and you go find someone else young. And so for every one individual that's prostituted or violated on a given night, there are 1 to 10 men who will purchase that individual.
And Derek, the other interesting thing I heard in Adam's story is obviously a lot of the people who come to your organization for these classes are mandated by the court, but sure, on the other hand, there are people who come in voluntarily. Who are those people, and how do they get to the point that they're doing it when they are not being ordered by a court to do so?
Yeah, you know, it's an issue that I think men haven't felt, comfortable being a part of, the anti-sex trafficking work or sexual violence. And I think with the work of More to Life and other great anti-trafficking organizations out there that are focusing on demand as a core issue that feeds into the crime, more and more men are feeling more comfortable. And on top of that, I think as men learn more about the ills of pornography and just in their own personal lives feeling unsatisfied, that's creating more a sense of urgency for men to want to seek help.
And the other, I think, all too, Alan, is that we ignite honor on the inside of men. A lot of John schools around the country really have the, we don't do that because they're already in a really bad, dark rabbit hole. They've been prosecuted. And so we ignite honor on the inside of men, because many it's a first offense. And we want to say that we don't really like to call it a John School as much as we like to call it restorative justice and demand education, because it's not just buyers, it's also men with sexual violences as well.
Well, let me ask you this, and this is really a tough question, but when you cover stories involving pedophilia, and you talk to the experts in the field, they often tell you that this is not something that can be cured. So if you're talking about almost an addiction to prostitution or pornography, does that fall under the same category, or are we talking about something completely different?
Sometimes it might, because sexual violence is camouflaged in a highly sexualized society. And so let's say someone, many of the men who are prosecuted are first offense, but they've done something in their past. We know fathers who have violated their children. Their children were 12, their children were 7. They may have a bust later on. We don't know. And so we can't say. If someone's a deep, hardcore pedophile, no, this is not the panacea. However, if you're going to be released back into the community, we have had pedophiles take the course. They're registered offenders, and it's post their 10-year jail sentence. And so when they go through that course, we give them a safe place to talk and to heal and to be educated, and then we know where they're not, because we want to lower recidivism rates, which is recriming.
Derek, is there a way to, basically talk about what kind of results that you get? And is there any kind of empiric data that shows that when you go through this program, you are less likely to reoffend? Yeah,
well, the program here locally we've had 100% success rate with the men as far as their understanding what prostitution was before coming in and seeing the change results.
So there have been no rearrests for this?
Well,
no,
right.
Not so far. And the national stats are 70%.
Yeah,
so.
And then on the national level, that's a 70% success rate in reducing recidivism. And so it is a very successful model. The education is really, really powerful. I think there's a lot of myths and misunderstandings that drive the buyer demand. And when you break those myths down and really speak to the heart of men, it is a powerful education that it's hard to walk away from and leave unchanged.
100% success is something
so far.
That's, well, it's an extraordinary number. What would make this program different than other programs around the country which have 70% success?
I think it's the restorative justice piece. For all the victims we serve, so far not one of them has had a great relationship with their father. when they begin to understand not only my story, but the story of other victims and the history of prostitution and sexual violence and pornography and the root causes, they're like, oh my God, I didn't know that. Some were violated. We had one who was a registered offender, and he was raped many times by his grandfather. He had no idea. He had never got help for it. It happened for 4 years. He had no idea that that caused him to have these addictions later in life. And so now he can get the help he needs, and he can have a safe place to do that with a therapist that we send him to.
And on top of that, our education, one thing that makes a difference is that we do offer 90 days of follow-up. So it's not just the 8-hour educational class that they're taking, but we're following up with those men to check in with them, how are you doing, and offer continued mentoring and coaching to ensure success.
Are these programs conducted in the same physical location as where the victims of human? Okay, because that I was you know, I was wondering if there would be any interaction to show the men the physical you know, results of what happens.
No, and it's highly confidential. It's a highly confidential course. Matter of fact, when we have our lunch break, we do a 10-minute break every hour and 20-minute lunch. They come in really like, oh my God. And by lunch, they don't want to leave because they, for the first time, there's this interaction there, but to discuss what they're going through, and it's quite powerful. And at the end, Alan, when someone says, in tears, not one guy so far has not cried. What about my son? How do I teach him this as well?
How many men can you handle a year going through this program, and is your capacity sufficient for the demand that is out there?
We can handle 75 men a month. It's quite a large classroom.
Right now, we know the demand. We can grow it. The demand that's out there. We'll be busy for a long time.
And the courts are they contribute how to, in terms of money and
just through the probationary process, and the man has to pay for it. So he's basically making a $210 donation to More to Life. And we also recently have done a 4-week course for Harvest House locally, and we'll be working with them quarterly for all the men in their program who are high risk.
Okay.
And so we are educating. I think we need to educate the courts, the judges, the community at large, because there is misunderstanding about what restorative justice and demand education is. That it's not a John school, and so the education is important.
Extraordinary work. I want to thank you both for coming in tonight.